The last ice cream cone served at the Ponderosa Ranch on September 26, 2004 was never finished. Somewhere between the first bite and the last, the visitor holding it looked up, felt the crowd going quiet around the gates, and simply stopped eating. What do you do when you realize the thing in your hand will never exist again in the same way? You hold it until the ice cream runs down your fingers and the afternoon light drops behind the Sierra Nevada, and someone standing beside you, a complete stranger, starts crying, and then without planning to, you are crying too, because a place that was never entirely real has somehow become the realest thing you ever lost. That is the story of the Ponderosa Ranch in Incline Village, Nevada. Not a museum, not a film studio, not exactly a theme park in the way people use that word. Something harder to name than any of those. For 37 years, it stood on the eastern shore of Lake Tahoe as the physical address of a fictional world, and millions of people walked through it as if it were a neighborhood they had always belonged to. When a billionaire sealed its gates in the fall of 2004, the questions that followed were ones nobody had good answers to. What happened to the buildings? What happened to the horses, the chapel, the mine, the cemetery, the ice cream parlor? What did the mountain do to all of it once the people stopped coming and the snow came back without anyone to watch it fall? The answers turned out to be stranger and sadder than most Bonanza fans ever knew, because the ranch did not simply collapse into the forest floor. Parts of it fought back against time in ways nobody planned, and some of what it left behind is still out there right now, buried under 2 decades of pine needles and silence, waiting without any awareness of how much time has passed. Bill and Joyce Anderson built the Ponderosa Ranch theme park beginning in 1967, opening officially in 1968 on land overlooking Lake Tahoe. Bonanza had been running on NBC since 1959 and drawing audiences of 50 million people per week at its peak, and those viewers flooded Nevada tourist offices with the same question written in slightly different ways. Where is the real Ponderosa? Where can we actually stand on it and touch the fence posts? The Andersons answered by building a full-scale replica of the Cartwright Ranch house on a mountain slope with the lake spreading out below, then kept building, adding Western street facades, a working saloon, a staged gunfight show, a stagecoach ride, a mystery mine, a wedding chapel, and eventually the Gunny Sack Cafe and the Hosberg Burger restaurant, which together would serve 3 million half-pound burgers before it all ended. What they created felt like stepping inside a memory you had never actually lived, and for 37 years people came from every part of the world to do exactly that. By 2004, the park welcomed around 250,000 visitors per season, its highest number in its entire history, and the final weekend made that number feel almost prophetic. September 25th brought 2,200 people, the biggest single Saturday in September the ranch had ever recorded. September 26th brought 2,350, the highest single-day attendance figure across all 37 years of operation. People arrived wearing cowboy hats and Cartwright vests. Gift shop shelves emptied within hours. Beer sold out before noon. Ice cream lines stretched long through the afternoon. And an employee named Diana Horsch told people later that it felt like losing a second home. Visitors stood at the entrance gates, whispering goodbyes as if speaking to a person they would never see again, and then the gates closed, and the silence that settled over that mountain was the kind that plans to stay. David Duffield had purchased the 570-acre property in July of 2004 for approximately $55 million. And the timing stunned conservation officials who had spent years pulling together more than $50 million in public funding to protect the land as open space with hiking trails accessible to everyone. Duffield's private offer arrived, slightly higher and dramatically faster, and the Anderson family accepted it. Chain-link fences appeared along the entire perimeter within weeks. Warning signs spread around every access road. The place that had welcomed 250,000 visitors in a single season became off-limits almost overnight. which meant everyone who had planned to come back next summer simply never got the chance. Duffield co-founded PeopleSoft and carried an estimated net worth of around $13.2 billion at the time of purchase. He stated publicly that he had no plans to develop the land and wanted to prevent construction from damaging the Lake Tahoe Basin. 12 years passed before anyone saw evidence of a larger intention, and that's when the picture shifted. In 2016, he and his wife Cheryl donated an 18.6-acre parcel called the Bullwheel property to the Nevada Land Trust, land that connected a missing link in the Incline Flume Trail between Marlette Highway and Tunnel Creek. The Bullwheel site held a structure built between 1880 and 1894, connected to the Great Incline of the Sierra Nevada. March of 2021 brought that donated land into the National Forest System, adding long-term protection to the Tahoe Basin's water quality and forest cover. None of that answered what fans kept asking, which was what actually happened to the ranch itself. The answer begins with volunteers who understood that Sierra Nevada winters are not kind to abandoned buildings. Snow at 5,000 feet accumulates deep and stays long. Freeze-thaw cycles crack wood and warp metal. Ultraviolet light at high altitude strips paint and degrades fiberglass faster than anywhere at sea level. Members of the Thunderbird Lodge Preservation Society moved quickly through a narrow window, pulling wagons, buggies, vintage automobiles, mining tools, and hand-painted signs into climate-controlled storage before the first heavy snowfall could claim them. What they assembled became one of the largest collections of Lake Tahoe and Old West artifacts preserved anywhere in the region. The small white wedding chapel required the most careful work, and the reason was that its history ran deeper than the ranch itself. Built originally in Janesville, California in 1871, it predated the Ponderosa Ranch by nearly a century before Bill Anderson moved it to Incline Village in the 1960s. At its busiest, the chapel hosted up to 15 weddings per week, as many as 780 ceremonies per year, with prices landing between $75 and $150. When the park closed, volunteers labeled every wooden plank, disassembled the entire structure, transported it more than 300 miles to Lemon Valley near Reno, and rebuilt it at Red's Ranch with original timbers and period-correct techniques. By 2022, the restoration was complete, and the chapel still hosts weddings today. The same wooden frame that held nearly 5 decades of vows, finding its way back to exactly the same purpose it was built for in 1871. The Cartwright Ranch House required patience measured in years and funding cycles. Volunteers numbered every log and stored the pieces in shipping containers, waiting for money that would allow a full reconstruction somewhere the public could reach. As of 2025, those numbered logs remain in storage and the funding has not arrived. And here's the thing about the house that most visitors never fully understood. The building was only 1 story tall. That staircase inside, the one that rose toward what seemed like the Cartwright bedrooms, led nowhere at all, stopping at a wall because bedroom scenes from Bonanza had always been filmed at Burbank Studios in California, 250 miles away. Only the living room, kitchen, dining room, and office actually existed on site. The right side of the house was never built because a highway ran too close, forcing television crews to shoot the exterior exclusively from the front. Inside, carved wooden figures stood frozen in ordinary moments. Ben Cartwright at his desk, Hop Sing in the kitchen, Little Joe's green corduroy jacket and Hoss's brown suede vest hanging on a rack as if both brothers had stepped outside and expected to return. Down the path from the main house, the Mystery Mine carried a story almost no one ever heard. The entrance led into a 50-foot fiberglass tunnel with a recorded cave-in sound effect, and it ran without incident through most of the park's history until 2004, when a short circuit caused a fire that burned support timbers and injured 2 visitors. The incident never reached the public. Maintenance logs recorded it quietly, and the ranch closed weeks later with that story still unknown to the families who had stood in that same tunnel the summer before. The Gunny Sack Cafe ran as the ranch's ice cream parlor from 1967 through 2004, moving as many as 1,000 cones per day on peak summer afternoons. A cone cost between 20 and 40 cents in the 1960s, and the Bonanza Sunday specialty ran 40 cents in the early years before climbing to around $1.50 by the park's later seasons. The Hosberg Burger restaurant sat right beside it and served 3 million half-pound burgers across 36 years, and that combination became how a lot of people stored the ranch in memory, not through photographs, but through taste. After Duffield sealed the land, the cafe's foundation disappeared under pine needles and decades of freeze-thaw cycling, and what remained of the picnic tables were stumps about 2 feet high, darkened beyond recognition, stripped of everything that once made them identifiable as places where families sat. The fiberglass horses never made it out. They had stood near iron hitching posts for decades, giving visitors a place to pose for photographs and pretend for a moment they were part of the Cartwright family. And when volunteers focused their efforts on the most historically meaningful artifacts, the horses were not prioritized. The forest accepted them without ceremony. Pine needles accumulated on their backs, ferns grew around their legs, branches wrapped across the hitching posts. Right now, somewhere on that mountain above Lake Tahoe, those horses sit buried in the undergrowth, holding their poses, carrying in their stillness the memory of 250,000 visitors who walked the ranch in its final year alone. The cemetery carried the heaviest emotional weight of any spot on the property, because it blurred the line between the fictional world of Bonanza and the real deaths of the people who created it. Around 15 white wooden crosses marked graves on a ridge near the main house, commemorating Ben Cartwright's 3 wives and other characters, and as the actual actors passed away, the ranch added memorial crosses for them alongside the fictional ones. Dan Blocker, who played Hoss Cartwright, died suddenly on May 13, 1972 at only 43 years old, and his marker appeared in the cemetery shortly after. Born in DeKalb, Texas in 1928 at 14 pounds, the heaviest birth weight recorded in Bowie County that year, Blocker grew to 6 feet 4 inches and over 300 pounds, and a casting agent discovered him at a payphone dressed in cowboy clothes. Victor Sen Young received a marker after 1980. Lorne Green's cross appeared after 1987. Michael Landon's joined in 1991. Pernell Roberts, who played Adam Cartwright, was still alive when the ranch closed in 2004, so no marker was ever placed for him, and when he died in 2010, 6 years after the land had been sealed, the mountain had already closed around that ridge, and the crosses were not accessible to anyone who might have wanted to add one more. In 2020, the Nevada Commission on Tourism approved a $10,000 grant to help Foundation 36 begin relocating original structures and exhibit pieces approximately 300 miles to Lemon Valley, giving the surviving remnants of the ranch a place to exist in public view again. The chapel stands and receives its weddings. The artifacts pulled out by the Thunderbird Lodge Preservation Society remain cataloged in climate-controlled storage. Across Nevada and California, original Ponderosa Ranch items that visitors carried out on the afternoon of September 26, 2004, sit in private homes and small museums as quiet evidence that something real happened in that place, even though the place itself has been off-limits for more than 20 years. The wheel ruts pressed into the dirt by 37 years of stagecoach traffic have faded to something visible only if you know what you are looking for. The foundations are overgrown. The silence is total. And yet it carries a specific weight that has never dissipated, the weight of 2,350 people saying goodbye on a single autumn afternoon, of a family that built something extraordinary out of a television show and a mountain and watched it pass out of their hands, of volunteers who ran against the calendar to save what they could before the snow made the decision for them. The Ponderosa Ranch is gone in the sense that no one can visit it, but the chapel still stands in Lemon Valley. The logs of the Cartwright ranch house are still numbered in their containers, still waiting, and the fiberglass horses are still there on the mountain above Incline Village, buried in the forest, holding their poses without impatience, without grief, without any knowledge of how many people still think about the afternoon when the gates closed and the ice cream melted and the last visitors stood at the fence saying goodbye to a fictional world that had somehow become completely, irreversibly real.